The morning sun cast long shadows across the floors of Windsor Castle as Sarah Martinez, seasoned royal correspondent, received an unexpected call from her contact within the palace walls. The voice on the other end spoke in hushed tones, revealing something that would soon capture the attention of millions. Worldwide, Prince William had made a decision about his coronation attire that defied centuries of royal tradition. Hidden within the intricate details of his ceremonial robes was a symbol so personal, so deeply meaningful, that even the most stoic members of the royal household found themselves moved to tears upon discovering its significance. The story began 3 months earlier, when William had quietly requested a private meeting with the palace's master tailor, a man who had served the royal family for over 4 decades. Behind closed doors, the future king presented a small, weathered photograph and made a request that left the craftsman speechless. Sarah's investigation led her through the winding corridors of royal protocol and into the heart of a family still healing from profound loss. The symbol William chose to incorporate wasn't just a tribute to his late mother, it's Princess Diana, but something far more intimate and personal than anyone could have imagined. As she delved deeper into the story, Sarah discovered that this wasn't merely about fashion or tradition breaking. It was about a son's promise made in the quiet moments after his mother's funeral when he was just 15 years old. A promise that he would carry her memory forward in a way that honored both her legacy and his future role as king. The photograph William had shown the tailor was one taken during a private family moment, never before seen by the public. In it, Diana wore a simple piece of jewelry, something she had treasured not for its monetary value, but for the story it told about love, sacrifice, and the strength found in ordinary moments. The master tailor, bound by decades of discretion, had initially hesitated to share the details of their conversation. But as the coronation approached, and the significance of William's choice became clear, he realized this story needed to be told. It represented something larger than royal ceremony, something that spoke to the universal experience of carrying forward the love and lessons of those we've lost. Sarah's phone continued to ring. Throughout that morning, as word began to spread through the tight-knit community of royal watchers and palace insiders, each conversation revealed another layer of the story, painting a picture of a man who had found a way to honor his past while embracing his destiny. The symbol itself was so subtle that most observers would miss it entirely during the coronation ceremony. It required knowledge of Diana's personal history and William's childhood memories to understand its profound significance. Yet for those who knew, it would serve as a powerful reminder that even in the most formal of royal traditions, the bonds of family and love remained the strongest forces of all. As Sarah prepared to break the story, she understood that she wasn't just reporting on royal fashion or ceremonial protocol. She was about to share a deeply human moment that would resonate far beyond the walls of any palace, touching the hearts of anyone who had ever struggled to honor a loved one's memory while forging their own path forward. The discovery of William's choice had already begun to stir emotions among those closest to the royal family, setting the stage for a coronation that would be remembered not just for its pageantry, but for its profound personal meaning. The revelation of what Prince William had chosen to incorporate into his coronation robes sent ripples of emotion through Westminster Abbey's preparation rooms. Lady Catherine Pemberton, the palace's chief ceremonial coordinator, found herself wiping away tears as she examined the delicate embroidery that would soon make history. The symbol was a tiny forget-me-not flower, barely visible among the golden threads and precious stones that adorned the ceremonial garments. But this wasn't just any forget-me-not. It was an exact replica of a pressed flower that Diana had kept in her personal jewelry box, one that held a story known only to her closest family members. 27 years earlier, a young Prince William had picked this flower during a family picnic at Balmoral Castle. Diana had been going through a particularly difficult period in her marriage, and the simple gesture from her 6-year-old son had meant everything to her. She had carefully pressed the flower between the pages of a book of poetry and later had it preserved in a small glass pendant that she wore close to her heart. During some of her most challenging moments, the pendant had been among Diana's most treasured possessions, never photographed by the media, never displayed publicly. It was something she kept private. It's a symbol of the pure love between a mother and son that sustained her through the complexities of royal life and personal struggles. After Diana's death, William had discovered the pendant among her personal effects, reading the accompanying note in his mother's handwriting, which simply said, "My brave boy's flower, September 1996, had left him overwhelmed with grief and love. He had kept the pendant close ever since, carrying it with him during significant moments in his life. The decision to incorporate the forget-me-not into his coronation attire hadn't been made lightly. William had spent weeks consulting with historians and protocol experts, ensuring that his tribute wouldn't violate any ceremonial traditions. What he discovered was that throughout history, monarchs had often included personal elements in their coronation regalia, though few had been as emotionally significant as his choice. The master embroiderer tasked with creating the tiny flower had worked for 3 weeks to perfect every detail. Using threads of the finest silk and microscopic beads, she had recreated the exact shape and delicate coloring of the original pressed flower. The work required a magnifying glass and the steadiest of hands, as the finished piece would be only slightly larger than a small coin, as word of the symbol's meaning spread among the palace staff. Many found themselves reflecting on their own memories of Princess Diana. The head butler recalled how she would often wear the small pendant during her private charitable visits, touching it gently when she met families facing loss or hardship. The royal florist remembered Diana's special fondness for forget-me-nots, how she had specifically requested them for several of her garden parties. Catherine, now Princess of Wales, had been deeply moved when William shared his plans with her. She understood the profound significance of carrying forward Diana's memory in such a personal way, especially during a ceremony that would mark William's formal step toward becoming king. It represented not just remembrance, but a promise that the values Diana embodied would continue to guide the monarchy. The emotional impact extended beyond the immediate royal family. Palace staff who had served Diana found themselves reminiscing about her warmth, her genuine care for others, and her ability to find joy in simple moments with her sons. The forget-me-not seemed to capture all of these qualities in its delicate form. As the coronation preparations intensified, the tiny flower had become a powerful symbol of continuity and love. It represented the unbreakable bond between a mother and son. It's the importance of carrying forward cherished memories, and the way personal love can enhance rather than diminish one's public duties. The story was beginning to spread beyond the palace walls, touching hearts, and reminding people everywhere of the enduring power of a mother's love and a child's devotion. The first public glimpse of Prince William's coronation robes came during a private viewing for select members of the Commonwealth representatives 3 days before the ceremony. Ambassador Margaret Thompson from Australia was among the invited guests, and she would later describe the moment as one of the most moving experiences of her diplomatic career. As William stood before the gathered dignitaries, explaining the various elements of his ceremonial attire, his voice remained steady and formal. The golden threads caught the light magnificently. The precious stones sparkled with centuries of history. The overall effect was breathtakingly regal. Then his fingers moved to a spot near his heart, where the tiny forget-me-not rested almost invisibly among the elaborate decorations. The change in William's demeanor was immediate and profound. His formal composure softened as he began to speak about his mother, his voice catching slightly as he explained the flower's significance. Several representatives found themselves reaching for handkerchiefs as William described finding the pressed flower among Diana's belongings and his decision to carry her memory forward in this deeply personal way. Dr. Elizabeth Hartwell, Royal, a historian who had been invited to document the occasion, later wrote that she had witnessed something extraordinary. In that moment, the formal barriers between prince and people seemed to dissolve completely. William wasn't speaking as a future king following protocol, but as a son sharing his love for his mother with people who had also been touched by Diana's compassion and grace. The emotional impact was amplified when William revealed another detail that hadn't been shared before. The positioning of the forget-me-not wasn't random. It had been placed in the exact spot where Diana used to pin small flowers during her charitable visits to children's hospitals. She had started this practice after a young patient had given her a dandelion, telling her that flowers made people feel better when they were sad or scared. News of this revelation spread quickly among the diplomatic community and palace staff. Chef Patricia Williams, who had worked in the royal kitchens during Diana's lifetime, found herself crying openly as she prepared refreshments for the evening reception. She remembered how Diana would often visit the kitchens, always wearing some small, personal touch that reflected her genuine warmth and connection to everyday people. The story resonated particularly strongly with mothers in the viewing group. Canadian Representative Jennifer Ross, herself a mother of 2 young boys, spoke afterward about how Williams' tribute captured something universal about the bond between mothers and children. The idea that a simple flower picked by a 6-year-old could become part of such a momentous ceremony spoke to the enduring power of childhood, memories, and maternal love. Social media began buzzing, with reactions as photos from the private viewing were carefully released by the palace. The images showed William gesturing toward the tiny embroidered flower, his expression mixing pride, sadness, and deep love. The contrast between the elaborate royal regalia and the simple, heartfelt tribute created a powerful visual story that transcended cultural and national boundaries. Religious leaders who attended the viewing were equally moved. The Archbishop of Canterbury, who would conduct the coronation ceremony, noted how the forget-me-not represented the Christian values of love, remembrance, and honoring one's parents that would be central to the religious aspects of the coronation. He privately decided to incorporate a special prayer of remembrance into the ceremony, honoring all the maternal figures who had shaped the lives of those present. The most touching response came from an unexpected source, Lady Sarah McCorquodale. Diana's sister had been quietly present at the viewing. Afterward, she approached William with tears in her eyes, thanking him for keeping Diana's memory alive in such a beautiful way. She revealed that she still kept a pressed flower from the same Balmoral picnic, one that Diana had given her as a sister's keepsake, as word of the tribute spread beyond the official channels. Florists across Britain began reporting increased requests for forget-me-nots. People were planning to wear the small blue flowers during the coronation celebration, creating an unspoken network of remembrance and solidarity that would span the entire nation. The emotional revelation had transformed what could have been a purely ceremonial moment into something deeply human and universally meaningful, setting the stage for a coronation that would be remembered as much for its heart as for its historical significance. Within hours of the story breaking in international media, something remarkable began happening across Britain and throughout the Commonwealth. What started as news about royal ceremonial attire evolved into a spontaneous national moment of remembrance and healing that surprised even the most seasoned royal observers. Mrs. Eleanor Patterson, a 67-year-old grandmother from Liverpool, was among the first to be photographed pinning a small forget-me-not to her coat lapel as she went about her daily shopping. When asked by a local reporter why she had chosen to wear the flower, her simple response captured the sentiment spreading across the nation. Diana was the people's princess, and William is showing us he's the people's future king. That little flower proves he hasn't forgotten where he came from or who loved him first. The response wasn't limited to older generations who remembered Diana's life and death. Young mothers pushing strollers through London parks began wearing forget-me-not pins, explaining to their children the story of a prince who loved his mother so much that he carried a memory of her with him to the most important day of his life. Teachers across the country reported children bringing forget-me-nots from their gardens to school, wanting to be part of something they sensed was special and meaningful. The most unexpected response came from unexpected places. Mental health advocates began sharing how William's public display of grief and love provided a powerful example of healthy ways to honor lost loved ones. Dr. Sarah Chen, grief counselor from Manchester, noted that many of her clients had been inspired by William's courage in making his private sorrow a part of his public role, helping them find their own ways to carry forward the memories of people they had lost. Social media platforms exploded with personal stories. People shared photos of their own pressed flowers, family jewelry, and meaningful keepsakes that help them feel connected to deceased parents, grandparents, and siblings. The hashtag #ForgetMeNotWilliam began trending worldwide as individuals from dozens of countries shared their own stories of love, loss, and remembrance. The commercial response was equally swift and overwhelming. British florists reported selling out of forget-me-nots within 48 hours of the story breaking. Garden centers across the country saw unprecedented demand for forget-me-not seeds and plants. Jewelry makers began creating delicate forget-me-not pins and pendants, with many donating portions of their profits to charities that Diana had supported. The most touching responses came from unexpected sources. Veterans organizations began sharing stories of how they had carried small mementos of fallen comrades into battle or important ceremonies. Teachers spoke about students who kept photos of grandparents in their graduation caps. Healthcare workers revealed how they often wore small tokens honoring patients they had lost, finding strength in keeping those memories close during difficult shifts. International media coverage focused on how William's gesture had created a moment of unity during politically divisive times. The forget-me-not story transcended partisan politics, economic concerns, and cultural differences, reminding people of shared human experiences of love and loss that connect everyone regardless of their circumstances. Children's responses proved particularly heartwarming. Schools across Britain reported students asking to plant forget-me-not gardens, with many dedicating them to grandparents or other family members they had lost. Art teachers found their classrooms filled with drawings of forget-me-nots, often accompanied by stories about people that children missed and wanted to remember. The response from Diana's charitable organizations was overwhelming. Representatives from organizations she had supported, from AIDS research foundations to homeless shelters, reported receiving an unprecedented number of volunteer applications and donations. People cited William's tribute as inspiration to continue Diana's work, seeing it as a call to action rather than simply a memorial gesture. Perhaps most significantly, the story began generating conversations about grief, memory, and healing that had been absent from public discourse. Families found themselves talking about their own lost loved ones, sharing stories that had been kept private for years. The forget-me-not had become a symbol not just of William's love for Diana, but of the universal human need to honor and remember those who have shaped our lives. By the eve of the coronation, it was clear that William's personal tribute had touched something deep in the collective consciousness, creating a moment of national reflection and emotional connection that would be remembered long after the ceremonial pageantry had ended. The morning of the coronation dawned crisp and clear, with thousands of people lining the streets of London, many wearing small forget-me-not pins or carrying bouquets of the delicate blue flowers. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation, but there was also an underlying current of emotional intensity that hadn't been present at royal ceremonies in recent memory. As Prince William made his way to Westminster Abbey, the cameras captured something extraordinary. Along the processional route, people held up forget-me-nots instead of traditional flags, creating a sea of blue that stretched for miles. Children waved handmade signs with pressed flowers attached, and elderly women dabbed at their eyes while clutching small bouquets that reminded them of their own cherished memories. Inside the abbey, the moment arrived when William would be presented in his full ceremonial robes. As he stood before the altar, the ancient stones of the cathedral seemed to hold their breath. The forget-me-not, though tiny and barely visible to television cameras, became the focal point for millions of viewers worldwide who had learned its story in the preceding days. Catherine, watching from her place of honor, touched her own small forget-me-not brooch, a gift from William that morning. Their children, Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis, each wore tiny forget-me-not boutonnieres, a family tribute that spoke to the continuing legacy of love and remembrance that would guide the future generation of royals. Most powerful moment came during the ceremony itself. As the Archbishop of Canterbury began the ancient words of blessing, a shaft of sunlight streamed through the abbey's stained glass windows, illuminating the exact spot where William's forget-me-not rested. Those present would later describe feeling as though Diana's presence had briefly filled the sacred space, offering her blessing to her son's momentous day. Television commentators, initially focused on the historical significance and traditional pageantry, found themselves moved to tears as they described the scene. The contrast between the elaborate centuries-old ceremony and the simple flower that represented a mother's love created one of the most emotionally resonant moments in modern royal history. The international audience response was immediate and overwhelming. Social media platforms registered record engagement as people shared their reactions to seeing William honor his mother in such a public, yet deeply personal way. Comments poured in from around the world, with people sharing their own stories of carrying forward the memories of loved ones through difficult or triumphant moments. Perhaps the most touching response came from unexpected viewers. In hospices and hospitals across Britain, patients and healthcare workers watched together, many finding comfort in William's example of how to carry grief and love simultaneously. Care home residents spoke with visiting family members about their own precious memories. Inspired by the prince's courage in making his private sorrow a source of public strength, the ceremony's most significant moment arrived during William's personal vows, when he added words that hadn't been part of traditional coronation ceremonies. Speaking directly from his heart, he promised to serve with the compassion my mother taught me, the courage she showed me, and the love she gave me. His voice trembled slightly as he spoke, and there wasn't a dry eye in the abbey. As the crown was placed upon William's head, completing his transformation from prince to king, the forget-me-not remained visible, a tiny but powerful reminder that even in the most formal of ceremonies, personal love and family bonds remain the strongest foundation for leadership and service. The processional return to Buckingham Palace took on a different quality than anyone had expected. Instead of the usual cheering and flag-waving, there was a deeper, more reverent atmosphere. People called out not just congratulations, but words of love and support. Acknowledging that they had witnessed something more than a coronation, they had seen a son honor his mother, and a future king demonstrate that vulnerability and love could coexist with strength and dignity. The balcony appearance that concluded the day's festivities provided the final, perfect image. As the royal family waved to the crowds below, William's hand moved unconsciously to the spot where his forget-me-not rested, a gesture that photographers captured, and that would become one of the most iconic images of the entire coronation. Day had transformed from a ceremonial obligation into a moment of national healing and connection, all centered around a flower no bigger than a coin that carried the infinite power of a mother's love. In the weeks following the coronation, it became clear that William's tribute had created something far more significant than a memorable ceremonial moment. The forget-me-not had sparked a cultural shift that touched every corner of British society and resonated throughout the Commonwealth nations. The most immediate and visible change appeared in British gardens. Nurseries across the country reported that forget-me-not seeds became their best-selling item. With waiting lists extending months into the future, community gardens began dedicating special sections to the flowers, often accompanied by small plaques inviting visitors to remember their own loved ones. The Royal Horticultural Society established a special memory garden initiative, providing free forget-me-not seeds to anyone who wanted to create a space for remembrance and reflection. Schools integrated the story into their curricula in unexpected ways. History teachers used William's tribute to discuss how personal values can enhance public service, while art classes created forget-me-not projects that helped children express their own feelings about family and memory. Most surprisingly, the story became a powerful tool for discussing grief and emotional resilience, with school counselors reporting that students felt more comfortable talking about lost family members after seeing how the future king had honored his mother. The impact on charitable organizations was profound and lasting. Diana's former charities experienced a surge in support that continued long after the initial coronation excitement faded. The Diana Award, which recognizes young people making positive changes in their communities, received record numbers of nominations. More significantly, new charitable initiatives emerged, often called forget-me-not programs, focusing on supporting children who had lost parents and helping families navigate grief while maintaining connections to their loved ones' legacies. Mental health professionals noted a significant shift in how people approached conversations about loss and remembrance. Dr. Amanda Richardson, who studies public responses to royal events, documented how William's example had given people permission to be more open about their grief while still pursuing their goals and responsibilities. Support groups reported increased attendance, with many participants citing the coronation as motivation to seek help in processing their own losses. The international impact proved equally remarkable. Commonwealth countries began incorporating their own remembrance traditions into official ceremonies. Inspired by William's example of balancing personal meaning with public duty, Canada established a memorial flower program for government ceremonies, while Australia created special garden spaces in Parliament House for remembering significant figures in the nation's history. Perhaps most unexpectedly, the story influenced wedding traditions across Britain and beyond. Brides began incorporating forget-me-nots into their bouquets as tributes to deceased family members, and jewelers reported increased demand for memorial jewelry that could be worn during important life events. The practice of including symbolic remembrances in celebration attire became so common that wedding planners began offering memory consultation services. The publishing industry experienced its own forget-me-not phenomenon. Memoirs and books about family relationships saw increased sales, while new publications focused on healthy ways to honor deceased loved ones became bestsellers. Children's books explaining grief and memory through flower metaphors filled bookstore displays, helping parents navigate difficult conversations with their children. The most lasting change occurred in how people viewed the relationship between private grief and public life. William's example demonstrated that acknowledging loss and carrying love forward could strengthen rather than weaken one's ability to serve others. This shift appeared in workplace policies supporting bereaved employees, educational programs addressing student grief, and community initiatives creating spaces for public remembrance. 5 years after the coronation, forget-me-not remained a powerful symbol throughout British culture. Annual memory days became common in communities across the country, with people gathering to share stories of loved ones while planting forget-me-nots in public spaces. The flowers became so associated with positive remembrance that hospitals began incorporating them into healing gardens, and hospices used them to help families process impending loss. King William himself continued to honor the tradition, wearing a small forget-me-not pin during significant royal engagements and encouraging others to find their own meaningful ways to carry forward the love of those they had lost. His children grew up understanding that remembering those who came before them was not just acceptable, but essential to becoming whole. Compassionate people. The tiny flower that had once been pressed between the pages of Diana's poetry book had grown into something larger than anyone could have imagined. It became a symbol of how love transcends death, how personal meaning can enhance public service, and how one person's courage to share their grief can help heal an entire nation. The coronation would be remembered for many things, but the forget-me-not ensured it would never be forgotten as a moment when a future king showed the world that the greatest strength comes from the courage to love openly, grieve honestly, and carry forward the best of those who shaped us.